Uganda's relationship with Rwanda in particular, but also with other neighbors. One of the aims and objectives of the FDC, as captured in our constitution, the FDC constitution, Article 6.5 of the FDC constitution, is to establish and maintain good relationships between Uganda and her neighbors. It is therefore in this regard that the FDC welcomes the opening and would like to thank the Republic of Rwanda for considering to reopen the main crossing at Katuna, crossing into Uganda and crossing into Rwanda. This closure happening about approximately 3 years ago on February 27, 2019, caused an unnecessary suffering to citizens of both our nations, I mean Rwanda and Uganda. People of, the people of Kabare, Ntungamo, and Kisoro in particular on the side of Uganda suffered most. These people not only trade with Rwanda, but many have family linkages. It is therefore a relief for them in particular, and a relief for Uganda that this border is finally reopening. I have been to Ntungamo personally, to Kisoro, to Kabare. On the side of Mirama Hills, for example, there are people in Rwanda who have gardens in Uganda. They cross not only once a day, but sometimes 3 times to come and dig in the morning, come and pick food, sometimes return in the evening. And I've seen this. We visited the border crossings because we even got a facility to construct a common border where Rwanda and Uganda should sit. So instead of someone going through a border on the Rwandan side and a border on Ugandan side, we constructed one facility where you sit Uganda and Rwanda to process goods and to process people who are crossing. So I have been to Mirama Hills, I've been to Katuna, I've been to Bunagana, and there are people who, in Rwanda who have gardens in Uganda. So imagine if your garden, if you can't access your garden for 3 years. So closure of the border was the highest form of expression of dissatisfaction by Rwanda against Uganda. The FDC therefore considers reopening just as a step in resuscitating a relationship that had completely broken down. The FDC would like to advise Rwanda to build and consider her relationship with Uganda as a relationship between nations and people, and not a relationship between a sitting government and the family of a sitting president. The Uganda ruler for life, Mr. Museveni, is a very difficult man who commits similar crimes. Rwanda is accusing him of against even his own citizens. Citizens in Uganda are still being abducted by armed men, kept in torture chambers and tortured beyond the stipulated constitutional timelines. Rwanda, we hear you when you complain that your citizens are being abducted. Even us here are being abducted by Mr. Museveni and his agents. This is characteristic of the Museveni regime. The FDC would like, in the same regard, to advise Mr. Museveni to stop risking our country and lives of citizens through aggressive foreign policy. During this period of closure, as many as 5 citizens were shot dead by Rwanda in Rwanda, Ugandans. These families must be compensated because this relationship and its deterioration, they did not play a part. So these families, now that the closure, one of the ceremonies to re-establish relationship, at least official one, with Rwanda, should involve compensating families that lost their dear ones. The two countries should consider compensating traders who have lost their trade and people who have lost livelihood as a result of this closure. Because we are harmonizing relationship not between leaders but between nations and between people. People who are hurting, there must be a process for them to be compensated. The FDC advises Mr. Museveni to also tread carefully with the elections coming up in Kenya. Already Mr. Museveni is being accused by some parties in Kenya of being partisan, of backing some candidates there. And Mr. Museveni, we want to call upon you not to risk Uganda once again. We're a poor, land-locked country that cannot afford conflicts with neighbors. So that's point number one today about our relations with the neighbors, and that's the view of the FDC. The second point is about the army. Last week, taxpayers' money was spent illegally on activities to remember the day General Museveni seized power through unconstitutional means on January 26, 1986. This week's ceremonies, this week, ceremonies are being organized to remember the day Museveni attacked Kabama military barracks in Mubende. Those of you who have been there, between Mubende and Sembabuli. Both these ceremonies are illegal and unconstitutional. The 1995 Constitution and the resultant 1996 elections did not only end the military rule in Uganda, but under the same constitution in 2005, multi-party democracy was restored. In fact, the NRM political party was registered in 2005. You remember the Honorable Bidandi Sari, Haj Chigongo, they are the ones who went to register NRM in 2005. So even if you didn't go to school, you should be able to calculate how many years between 2005 and today. They cannot be 36. So that's when NRM was born. So which NRM was celebrating 36 years? Is it the one registered in 2005? Or the one that unconstitutionally took over power? The FDC will be seeking a constitutional interpretation on this matter, whether we can continue spending taxpayers' money on celebrating what should everyone see as an illegal historical incident. The 1995 Constitution also gave birth to a new army and named it Uganda People's Defense Forces. Article 2082 of the Constitution states that the Uganda People's Defense Forces shall be non-partisan, national in character, patriotic, professional, disciplined, productive, and subordinate to civilian authority as enshrined under this Constitution, as established under this Constitution. You should here mark the word established under this Constitution. So UPDF is established by the 1995 Constitution. It therefore cannot be the army that is celebrating, I think it's now 37 years, because this army is established by the 1995 Constitution. If you read Article 208, it is not only illegal, but immoral to even remind the country of the formation of another army called National Resistance Army, whose anniversary will be celebrated on February 6, otherwise known as Tarehe Sita. Continuing to celebrate both these days is proof that Mr. Museveni is ruling Uganda as a military man. It is also confirmation that the 1995 Constitution was long ago overthrown. Look at the structure of the army as it is today. The 1995 Constitution under Article 2010, and you can go and check them, bestows the authority to create the structures and organs of UPDF in the hands of Parliament. And Parliament, through the UPDF Act, enacted the UPDF structures and organs. These organs include the land forces, the air force, but Museveni illegally created another outfit called the SFC in total defiance of the Constitution and in total defiance of the UPDF Act. This is therefore to remind the UPDF leadership that who are preparing to attend Tarehe Sita, that celebrations, that by attending these celebrations, these particular UPDF military leaders, individual and collectively, are committing treason, because they are going to attend a day when an illegal military outfit was formed called National Resistance Army, in fact outlawed by the 1995 Constitution that created the UPDF. So we no longer have an army in Uganda called National Resistance Movement. And UPDF, if you read the Constitution, was established by the 1995 Constitution. And that's when the NRA statute was done away with. So these individuals going to take part in this celebration should stand on. In fact, in the future, they may be charged with treason. And that's very common in Africa. It doesn't matter whether you are sitting in, as long as when you lose power, people can bring back crimes committed when you are in power. That's why Bashir in Sudan is in prison. Mubarak nearly until his death was in prison, and there are many examples on the African continent. So we want to warn the UPDF leadership, the individual commanders, that attending a day on which NRA was created is treason. Because if you want to celebrate the history of the army, the Ugandan army never started with Museveni. We had an army, the very first army called the Uganda Army, that was created by the colonial administration that we needed in 1962, Uganda Army. That was an army. You had UNRF. So we have had several armies in Uganda, but the 1995 Constitution took a decision that from then onwards we will have only one army called the UPDF. So you therefore cannot go to Kololo to celebrate the day Uganda Army was formed. Neither can you go to Kololo to celebrate the day UNRF was formed, because all those are illegal. You can only fund and prepare to celebrate the day UPDF was formed, and it is formed by the 1995 Constitution. Of course, to the country, these celebrations are proof that we are far away from the dream of having a national army, an army that Museveni does not think it is personal, not commanded by children of sitting leaders. So that task remains. Eventually, when Museveni has gone, we will have to embark on building a national army that will outlive. You know, Idi Amin also used to celebrate January 25th, the day he seized the power, and the celebration is ended with Amin. Museveni, who went to school, I thought would behave differently. But African leaders are African leaders. In Zimbabwe, even on his deathbed, they were still celebrating Mugabe's birthday. You can imagine a country celebrating the birthday of a president. Even when they removed him, that year they celebrated Mugabe's birthday. And it was a holiday. The country did not work because they were remembering the day Mugabe was born. I think Museveni has been shy. Instead of celebrating the day he was born, now celebrate the day he captured power, the day he attacked the barracks. Things that are illegal. BYABASAIJA. If you read the Uganda Prisons Act, Clause 21. Clause 21 of the Prisons Act says a prison officer who clocks 60, a prisons officer who clock 60 must retire. If you clock 60 and you are in prison, you must retire. This BYABASAIJA, even last time he came when he was over 60 for parliamentary approval, and parliament being parliament, they approved him. Now he's being reappointed. The trouble we have now, I think, is Museveni. See, someone who wants to die in office, he will want many other people to die in office, so he's not isolated. That's how Mutebile ended up dying in office. For more than 10 years, Mutebile was not working. But Museveni kept him there until the man died. You remember, Museveni wanted Odoki. After his retirement under the constitution, he told him, please, you stay on, don't go. And people had to go to court. Can you imagine taking a former Chief Justice to a high court? Because if you remember the case of the Honorable Gerard Karohanga, they went to high court to compel Odoki to retire. Former Chief Justice Kavuma even attempted to amend his age. Because, I mean, why should I be the only one retiring when people are not retiring? Now we have BYABASAIJA. This BYABASAIJA is, I think, it should now be approaching 70. The Prisons Act says when you clock 60 and you are still in service, you retire. So BYABASAIJA is not even fit to be a prison warder under the Prisons Act. Because the moment you are in prison service at 60, you retire. And I don't know what's wrong with Ugandans. I saw MPs, I missed the session at which they were praising Mutebile. Someone who wanted to stay on until you are wheeled to your grave. Because the man had been unwell for a very long time. But he stayed on and was only retired by the Almighty, and people wheeled him to his grave. Because why should BYABASAIJA accept to be reappointed when he knows that the Prisons Act does not allow? In the future, people like these will be asked to refund all the money that they got when they were illegally reappointed. Because even if Museveni reappoints you, please tell him I am over 60. The law does not allow. Finally, the FDC leadership, the party president and secretary general, the treasurer general, Honorable Jack Sabit, and others were in western Uganda over the weekend. Those of you who are keen may have seen them in Kasese. I remember in previous press conference I told you we will be moving to sub-regions to check on the health of the FDC, meet the FDC leaders, meet those who participated in the last elections. So in Kasese, on a reconciliation mission, they held several meetings, at which one of the former MPs, the Honorable Robert Centenary, in the last election he stood as independent because he had problems with the FDC in Kasese. Rejoined the party and was issued with an FDC card. So we'd like to call all the FDC and former FDCs and Ugandans who want to associate and be part of the FDC, this is the time. If you had been angry, please, the period to heal is now. We can reassure you into the FDC and together we continue with the fight to free ourselves.